My name is Arunansu Pattanayak. I'm a senior cloud solution architect at Microsoft. So, as a Azure architect, like my primary role is to kind of advise customers on how to architect their use case or solution using Azure products. I'm certified in all the data related certifications on Azure because that's what I specialize in. So I'm going to talk about how to modernize your data estate using Microsoft products. So data is your strategic asset. There is no doubt about it. People say data is the new oil. Data is the new currency. So in today's world, you have to rely on your data and build your business around data to succeed. Right. So, but there are challenges around that, right? And the typical big data challenge is, data depending on the volume, variety, and velocity. That's where the challenge is. How do you architect data around such a large amount, right? And then uh, knowledge of the data, like what data do I have? Can I trust it? How can I enable faster insight from it? Am I implementing all the compliance on all the data, right? Those are the questions that people have. And like Microsoft's vision of enabling every person and every organization to achieve more centers around the data and AI, and it all goes through this feedback loop where you use the data to engage customer, you use the data to empower your employee, and that's how you then transform your product, you optimize your operations, and this feedback loop then generates more data, and which leads to even better engagement with customer, better employee empowerment, and better optimization of your product, and better transformation for good, right? And data is not just data is everywhere, right? So you have your business data, you have your unstructured data, and the hybrid is what most people are leaning towards, right? So you can have cloud. Most big organizations have multi-cloud strategy, but you cannot really get rid of your on-prem. So everybody has to be a hybrid type of environment where they have something on-prem, some things on different clouds, and you need to have a strategy to connect it all, derive insight from it, and have a single pane of glass where you can manage everything, right? And the way Microsoft differentiates in this market is, first of all, being cloud. The number one reason for going to the cloud is the scalability, right? The scalability is limitless. And Microsoft's focus on AI allows you to derive insight and intelligence out of your data. And hybrid is, of course, as I said, everybody has to be in hybrid. And Microsoft is, we have grown up in the on-prem world, and now we're going to cloud. So we have the most comprehensive hybrid story around data. And security, of course, at every level, security has to be designed with it. So security cannot be bolted in. It has to be part of the process at every level. Microsoft understands that, and the way we have architected our cloud and our infrastructure is that you are always in control of your data, and you choose where your data resides, and Microsoft can secure it. Of course, you can use other third-party products on top of it, and Microsoft has built-in services in the cloud and on-prem to defend your data at all layers. Now, talking about different places where the data resides, that is on-prem, you have data modernization on Azure or any cloud, and then we'll also talk about this is just operational data, but what about the analytics? From your operational data, the data that you're gathering, how can you use analytics to understand what's happening, so that that feedback loop understanding the data then will help you decide, how to make better decision about your operation, so you can optimize your operation, right? So first of all, let's cover the on-premise. Microsoft has grown up in the on-prem world, and there are several tools that are available in on-prem. And if you are working in a large company, it's just not possible that you don't have any Microsoft product, right? Every company has something Microsoft. But around data, there is SQL Server 2019 is the latest version of SQL Server, and SQL Server allows you to have on-prem, and it also connects to the cloud. Now SQL 2022 is already released on private preview, which is our most cloud-enabled database yet. So the idea of SQL Server is that you can have it run anywhere, and it gives you that same consistent look and feel. So using SQL Server, you can run it on-prem, you can run your hybrid or cloud, you could even run it on the edge device for IoT. Azure Arc is our technology for managing hybrid workload. There are also other solutions like Stack, where you have to buy a server, but Azure Arc is a software-based solution. So you don't have to buy a special type of hardware. With Azure Arc, you just deploy the solution using your existing data center, and it makes your data center look like the Azure control plane. So you can manage your on-prem, Azure, and even other cloud in a single panel with a similar consistent control plane that is available through Azure portal. Using that, you can, anywhere your workload is, you just manage it as if it's a Azure resource, right? And this works everywhere, right? And it's built on Kubernetes, so it can run anywhere. Talking about data modernization, Microsoft recently got awarded by Gartner as the best in operational database management systems, right? So Microsoft has the most comprehensive databases. And we'll talk about different databases now. So from a relational database, of course, SQL Server is our oldest and most mature product. SQL Server was the first product that got into cloud when Microsoft went into cloud, right? So SQL Server has a whole variety of products. We'll talk about that in more detail later. But besides that, Microsoft is also heavily invested into open source. So all the open source databases like Postgre, MySQL, MariaDB, they are also available on Azure. On Microsoft, the NoSQL platform is available through Cosmos DB, and Cosmos DB is a multimodal NoSQL platform, meaning it's one database that can act like a MongoDB or a Cassandra. Through it has a graph API that you can use. So traditionally in on-prem, you used different types of NoSQL databases for different use cases, but Cosmos DB gives you that comprehensive feature so that you can choose the API you want, you can interact with your data the way you prefer, and Cosmos DB optimizes your workload behind the scene so you get the best performance. For in-memory database, that is Azure Cache for Redis. Right now, within Azure SQL, there is mainly three variety of product within the cloud native platform, right? The PaaS services. There is a single database. So this is the most typical your Azure SQL database, which is the cloud version of PaaS Azure SQL database, and this is best for if you're starting new. Building a new app, this is the database that you should use, right? Because this is the database that gets the latest and greatest from whatever Azure comes in with. The most cloud native features are available on Azure SQL database. Now, if you have a scenario where your database workload is more seasonal, so maybe you are a retail company where in a particular season you get more heavy workload. Other seasons, you're not getting that much, right? So then you can take advantage of the elastic pool, where you can have multiple databases part of a pool and they can share workload. So this is a kind of a cost saving feature. So if you design your database this way, then you don't have to provision a higher database that might not get used. Whatever you have in the pool, they can share resources among each other. So without increasing your uh, vCore or provision higher vCore for your database, you can use your elastic pool shared workload to manage your seasonal shift in demand, right? There is also managed instance. If you're coming from the on-prem world, you might be running some instance level features like SSIS or SSRS, right? So Azure SQL Managed Instance is designed to be most compatible with on-prem SQL. So you can run all those workload and get kind of an on-prem like feel using a managed instance. And all of these databases, they're available on two pricing tier. One is general purpose. The next is business critical. So most enterprise users, they typically go for business critical because that's where you get the most comprehensive set of feature. There is also hyperscale. So if your database grows all of a sudden to up to like 100 terabyte, then you can take advantage of hyperscale. One downside of hyperscale you should know is that once you go hyperscale, you cannot scale down. It's easy to scale up within business critical or general purpose. You can go up and down, but if you go to hyperscale, you cannot scale down. So if you need to scale down, you pretty much have to create a new database, migrate, and then delete the older one. Right. So besides all the PaaS services and SQL on Edge, if the platform as a service does not work for you, you are using certain features of SQL on-prem, typically the operating system level access. If you are using that, then some of those PaaS services might not meet your need. And how do you know whether a cloud version of SQL is going to meet your need, right? So there is a service called Azure Migration Program. Using the Azure Migration Program, there is a special component of it that deals with database migration. If you run that program will tell you whether your on-prem database is compatible with the cloud version, whether it's Azure SQL DB or managed instance, whatever you are trying to migrate to. That program will tell you if there are any incompatibility. More than likely, if you are using any operating system level code within your stored procedures, those are what's going to show up as incompatible. So you have the option of either you rewrite your code so that you can make it compatible with the cloud version, or you use SQL Server on virtual machine, which is what we call our infrastructure as a service. If you use the virtual machine, then it's pretty much becomes a replica of your on-prem. So there you can run, whatever you run on-prem, you can just run it as is. So that type of migration is what we call lift and shift, because you just take what you have on-prem and just copy it over to Azure, and that's like, moving your data center. The features I talked about, some of them, with PaaS service, you can have serverless compute, so you don't have to provision services. It can scale up and scale down. I think some of the earlier talks talked about the advantages and disadvantages of serverless, that sometimes the warm-up time can cause delay, but the advantage is in its most cost optimized. Most enterprise users, they need private link. Most enterprise users use, because of the regulations, they require that the databases not be exposed to the internet. So through private link using Azure Express Route, you can have a VPN from your on-prem to the databases, so that you access your database through you have private link, which is an extension of your on-prem network, right? So it's never exposed to the internet. And with SQL databases, you get SLA of 99.995%. So that gives you the highest uptime. Okay. We talked about database compatibility. If you run the AMP tool, the migration program, that will give you the compatibility check, and it will tell you whether it's compatible or not. There is also this website, aka.msdb compact, that can tell you whether it's compatible or not. Now, Cosmos DB has, I talked about Cosmos DB with multimodal API, right? So you have your table API, which is more like key value. You have a Cassandra API, which is column family API. Then you have a Core SQL, which is a document API similar to MongoDB, and Gremlin is the graph API. And Cosmos DB is available on multiple regions. You can have active setup where it can take traffic and have real-time write enabled in multiple regions. It also has SLA of like 99.999%, like 5 nines. Okay, and Cosmos DB gives you consistency levels, so you can select, like, if you need transaction support, you can choose a strong consistency. So then Cosmos DB almost gives you the relational database type of performance. In terms of transaction, there is a bounded staleness where you can say that my reads will lag behind writes by certain number of prefixes. You can have session level consistency where whatever you write within a session, you can read without delay. And you can have a consistent prefix where the reads will never go out of order. So you read in the same order that you write, and eventual is what we typically see in like the search engines or social media websites, which is like, it will eventually be consistent. So you get fast performance, but the databases will have a lag. So you will have dirty reads. We're kind of sacrificing your read consistency for performance. Talked about latency and high availability with 5.9 SLAs. Right? Now, talking about analytics. So this is your relational databases or NoSQL, they are good for your operational databases. But then once you get the data, you need to analyze the data to make decisions about your business and improve operations of your application and databases, right? So on Azure, the analytics is done, the central product is Azure Synapse, which is kind of a comprehensive analytics platform. Now, Synapse has something called Synapse Pipeline, which you can use to ingest data from different sources into Synapse. So Synapse uses the Azure storage account, the blob store, to store data. And then you can use different types of compute, like a SQL compute, which is inherited from the SQL data warehouse, or you can have Spark pool, or there is a data explorer pools to do different types of analytics. And you can then share the data using data share or Power BI, right? And the picture here also is talking about Data Factory and Databricks, which are different tools that you can use to do the ingestion. Azure Synapse was, through different benchmarks, it was shown to be the highest performing with 94% less cost compared to most of the other tools by other vendors. Okay. So this is kind of the internal architecture of Synapse. So it has these layers, right? So at the top, you have the Synapse Studio, which gives you the UI IDE type of experience to do things. And that IDE has different tabs where you can do your integration. It has database templates. So there are industry designed database templates. So depending on your industry, you can say that, okay, I want a finance table. So Microsoft has recommended schemas that says that, okay, if you're creating a finance table, a customer table, then typically it should have these fields, right? So you have those database templates that you can use to create database using industry standard schema. You can manage your resources. You can monitor using Azure Monitor. So all of your logs can go to log analytics, and the runtime that you use to analyze your data, it can be a SQL, it can be Spark, or it can be Data Explorer, right? So Data Explorer is what traditionally used with log analytics to kind of query your log data to kind of get real-time visualization of all of your logs and monitoring information, right? And using this, you can now build your data warehouse, data lake. With Databricks, there is a lake house architecture, so you can enable all that through Synapse, right? There is also a real-time streaming that you can do. You can use Event Hub or Kafka and have data stream into Synapse. Synapse also has something called Synapse Link, which is a dedicated link to different services. Right now, it has a link to Cosmos DB and Dataverse. And with SQL 2022, it will also have Synapse Link for SQL Server. Now, what Synapse Link does is, for example, in Cosmos DB, you can create an analytical store, which is like a real-time replication of your data. So whichever container that you create, you can have another container that is a transactionally replicated container of that data. So, and that analytical store is what you can use in Synapse to do your analytics. And that analytics store does not take away your throughput from your primary container that you use for with your operational data that you connect to your application, right? So the application does not suffer from performance because you are using the analytics store for analytics, because they even though they live in the same database, they do not share throughput, right? So that analytics store can be used in Synapse to do real-time analytics. So in real time, you are actually able to analyze the data that is getting into Cosmos DB in Synapse, and you can generate real-time reports on it without sacrificing performance on your data. So that gives you a real-time insight into what's happening in your data. Now, Dataverse is a data repository for your business applications, typically the Dynamics suite of application. They store their data in a common area called the Dataverse. So using Synapse Link, you can take the Dataverse data and do the similar type of analytics that you do with Cosmos DB, but with your business data that is in Dynamics, right? So these are your customer data, your CRM data, and even in your finance data if you're using Dynamics fraud protection, right? Now, all of this can also be tied to Azure Purview. So Azure Purview is our governance platform. So Azure Purview can connect to all of the data sources, and you can have a single pane where you can say what is the classification of data, right? Which data is private, which is public, and you can have metadata classification. You can add business glossary to your data. All that you can do in Purview, and the Purview seamlessly integrates with Synapse. I talked about the analytical store and Synapse Link for Cosmos DB. Now, the Purview, I briefly talked about it. This is our governance platform. Now, Azure Purview is now getting rebranded into Microsoft Purview because Purview is growing to include the Microsoft 365 and Dynamics data also. And Purview has a studio type of environment similar to Synapse, where it will expose you to data catalog to show all of your data stores that are available. And these data stores can be in Azure, on-prem, or in other cloud. So no, it's not just Azure. So Microsoft is positioning itself as hybrid and multi-cloud platform provider. So with Azure, you have that capability to manage all of your on-prem, Azure, and other cloud data from Azure Purview. And the data map is what shows you the map of which data resides where, and how is the lineage maintained. So in Azure Purview, you can see the lineage of your data, and you can see instant insight about which is like a report of who is using what data, how many of what classification of data exists within your enterprise. So it's like the single snapshot for your governance team to see what type of data you have, who owns what data, and what is the classification of data that exists today. Now, briefly talked about data share. All of the analytics that you do in a Synapse, eventually you might need to share with different organizations or different external vendors, right? So Azure Data Share is a technology that you can use to give a secure area where you can share data with a particular vendor, which might be external to your organization, and they can use data share to look at the data and not have access to anything else, your operational data or any other analytical data. Okay, so that's all. If you have any questions, I will look at the chat for questions, or you can email me. If you have my name, it's a long name, but if you can copy it from the list, my email is just my first name dot last name at microsoft.com. And you can connect me on LinkedIn, which is linkedin.com/in/my first name.